first, I want to start. Steve just said the score. It was a shocking turn of events, but not so shocking if you watch Kentucky play Georgia, because Georgia gave them, I'm remiss to mention, we're watching right now Georgia-Alabama, which we will talk about in just a second. A little weird, a little different feeling now that Nick Saban is on TV instead of on the sidelines. But first, Kentucky and Ole Miss. Ole Miss, a team that a lot of people had in the college football playoff, a team that a lot of people said potential Heisman candidate in Jackson Dart at the start of the year.
Yeah, that was your guy.
They drop a game here and now. But my thought is, because before it would have been, Ole Miss, they're done, they're cooked, it's over, they lost, they can't. Well, now in the new playoff era, that's not true.
Nope, not at all. So last week, I'm sorry, go ahead, my bad.
What about this, though? We just watched Kentucky take the presumptive number one team in the nation. We'll see how that is after the end of this. Well, obviously, Texas number one. But up until literally 24 months prior, Georgia was number one team in the nation.
For 2 years in a row. Yeah.
So we
lost one game.
We saw Kentucky take them to the brink.
Yeah.
And now we've seen Kentucky beat a sixth-ranked team. They have 2 losses on the year already.
Stoops.
My first thought literally was, what's their shot for the playoff?
I know.
That's where my head went. Not Ole Miss is cooked. It's over. Not Georgia and Alabama are playing for the de facto SEC championship today. What is the 2-loss Kentucky Wildcats shot at the playoff now that they've played some SEC teams tough?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. They're an SEC team. So we all have this SEC bias we know that we all live by within college football. I'm tired of even debating about it and talking about it. It is what it is. You can sit and complain about it. It's not going to change. You know what I'm saying? So why not just go ahead and just agree with what it is and just watch football and let it happen how it happens. So now you look at Kentucky. If they get even closer, they're outside. They're 14, 15, 13. You're going to have loud people from the Bluegrass State that want them in the college football playoff. But last week while you were out, Mr. Arnie Spaniard and I were on there, and I threw a question at him, and it was off the topic, and we were talking college football, and I just took a left. You know how I like to turn down roads sometimes, and I said, is an early loss even worth anything now?
Nope.
In college football, the early September used to be cupcakes and whatever big upset we could find. That's what college football used to be. With a 12-team playoff now, that is no longer the case. And I'm not saying I got a problem with it. I don't. But let's just understand this is the changing of college football now, especially with these mega conferences. You're bound to probably drop an early game. Texas just looks dominant. They have 2 quarterbacks, and they got dudes all up and down the offense and defensive line. Their offensive line have 3 NFL prospects. One's going to be a top 5, top 6 pick. They're dominant. They got receivers, running backs. They lose a running back for the year. They just plug the next guy in. So I don't think no one will beat them, but we know tonight either Alabama or Georgia is going to have a September loss. Either one of these teams are losing, and somebody could possibly lose again. Whoever loses this game, it's not over for them. The season's not done, not even close. Just got to go back to the drawing board, correct what went wrong, and I don't want to use the phrase "it doesn't matter," Martin, but it doesn't kind of matter.
Well, here's the thing, it matters. But it used to mean everything.
It used to kill your season.
Now it's just another notch in your resume. That's all it is. It's just another line on the resume. But it used to mean everything.
Oh,
the sun, the moon, and the stars. The earth would stop rotating. But now
you lose September 28th.
So think about this. It was devastating. To your point, right? To your point, either Georgia or Alabama leaving with a loss. And I know that. Bear with me, national audience. I know that this team is probably not the national title contender they were last year. But at the time that this game was scheduled, they were. But Michigan and Texas, one of those 2 teams was leaving with a loss. Right?
Early, September 7th.
If Michigan had continued to build and be the team that they were, they would be, right now, if you had kind of imported, say, J.J. State and so on and so forth, if they had imported, that would be a top 5 team.
Absolutely.
And Texas would be a top 5 team, and one of them would have a loss, right? After this, Georgia, Alabama, we will see one of, maybe at worst, the loser of this falls to 7.
Yeah. These are still 2
at worst.
After tonight, in my eyes, these are still 2 of the top 5 teams in college football. 100%. This game does not change my mind about neither one of these teams currently constructed at all.
And so you got that and then on top of that, now I wonder how that impacts. All right, because now Colorado does not necessarily fit into this category because they are a very popular team.
Yeah.
but not a team that we have seen atop of the college football landscape very recently, right? How does the fact that we've seen the Georgias and the Alabamas and LSUs and whoever else climbs up this thing, right? The Clemsons even. We've seen these teams and they'll have two losses. Let's say Coach Prime and them only lose the one game. Now, how does it adjust in the rankings? Like this whole college football playoff thing, it doesn't eliminate teams like it used to, but what it does is it does generate more conversation for the seeding, which it takes away some of the immediacy and the urgency of the sport, but ultimately more people are invited to the party.
And not only that, you look at the Ole Miss. Let's swing to that game real quick against Kentucky. That's a bad loss. It's early, but that's a bad loss. And we know what Kentucky's been doing. We know Kentucky pushed Georgia to the brink, not just this year, last year too. Like Kentucky has beaten some other top teams in SEC. They've been very competitive. But for Ole Miss to drop this game at home, that's the alarming part to me. Is for them to lose this game at home against a Kentucky team that clearly they were better than and should have beaten. But when you look at the box score, it's like Ole Miss put up 10 in the third quarter. They had two scoreless quarters. They didn't score in the second quarter. They didn't score in the fourth quarter. You can't win tight football games on any level in America if you can't score in the fourth quarter. Well, that's just not unless you got a 30-point lead already or something ridiculous like that.
I personally think that's part of the reason why I was kind of impressed with Kentucky, because when you think of what Ole Miss football has put up so far this season, and then this team had 52 points, 40 points, and 52 points.
Oh, they've been rolling
in the 3 games prior.
Rolling.
And I know it was Furman, but they scored 76 points.
Yeah.
Right? And then we look at Georgia, who, they're punting here against Alabama, but, big decent offense. Like, slower scoring, but you expect – Kentucky had them in hell.
Yes.
I think Kentucky's defense might just be real.
Yeah, well, Stoops is a defensive guy. He comes from a defensive tree. Bob Stoops was a defensive guy in Oklahoma. Do you guys remember all the guys that were getting to the NFL from Oklahoma at one point? Roy Williams at safety. Tommy spelled it with an I-E on the end of, I forget his last name, but a defensive lineman that was a top 5 draft pick. Like Oklahoma used to just throw studs into the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. It's Stoops. It's the Stoops family. It's what they do. It's like the Shanahan family. Their offenses, guess what, guys? The Shanahan family, guess what their offenses are going to be? Really, really good. And it's been that way for the last 25, 30 years of NFL played football. So you're right. The defense is legit. But this had a game. When you watch this game, Martin, and you watch body language, I am about energy and body language of players. It felt like Ole Miss thought they can just roll out today, because it was Kentucky coming in on a home game. That's the body language I was getting. And in football, the worst thing you can do is think that you can just show up, because 9 times out of 10, if you don't have Pat Mahomes, if you don't have Jalen Milroe, if you don't have Joe Burrow when he was at LSU, if you don't have a Troy Smith when he was at Ohio State at quarterback, or a Mike Vick when he was in Virginia Tech, Cam Newton, exactly. Remember, he's down 21-0 in the Iron Bowl and pretty much brings them back all by himself. If you don't have one of those guys that can just kind of put the team and the whole program or franchise on his shoulders and back and go get a dub, before you cut it on, it's too late. You give the other team that shouldn't be in the game with you right now. They don't have the players that you have. There's a reason why Kentucky has 2 losses already, and Ole Miss is, as Martin said, people think can get to the Final Four, the semifinals. People think they have a quarterback that's a Heisman candidate. They're the number 6 ranked team in the nation. That tells me right there, listen, the Jimmies and Joes don't match up. But when you just think you can show up and the other team gains confidence, you are in trouble. And that's what I saw, is when you start to see players start to kind of turn and look at each other, defensive backs get beat, and they stand up at the making the tackle and they're pointing to their teammate. That tells me right there, you guys are not locked in. And now you're giving this team confidence. Strap in. It's going to be a dogfight, and it was a dogfight, and they couldn't pull it off, man. They had the lead, gave it up, game.
I tell you what, man, I'm very much still getting used to this conference realignment.
I know,
As I look at Kentucky at Texas in November 23rd. Right in
Wisconsin came to USC today. What?
Right. I mean, I'm watching Stanford and Clemson play a conference game. Thanks a lot, Powers that be.
That one's kind of ridiculous. Stanford and Clemson, think about that, are playing a conference game today.
At least it's all about the kids.